Justin Trudeau's CBC is absolutely distraught after they were labeled government-funded media, which is factual. That is the truth. And now they have stopped tweeting through their Twitter account in response to this. I know, it's absolutely hilarious. So let's get into what happened. So CBC Radio Canada has paused activities on its corporate and news Twitter accounts after the social media platform put a government-funded media label on its @CBC account in its latest move to stamp public broadcasters with designations. Okay, so let's go over to CBC, and you can see right there 69% government funded media, which is true. You know, it's actually true. And then if you click on that, it goes into why those labels have been put in force. And, you know, I think this is fantastic. I really think this should have happened a long time ago, because a lot of people really don't realize that CBC is biased. And, you know, even though they're going to try and weasel their way out of it, saying, oh, we're not funded by the state entirely, so it doesn't mean that, you know, we're not putting out any propaganda. We're only getting 69% of our funds from the government. I mean, it is just absolutely insane. But a lot of people don't think critically. That's what we know. So let's go over now and take a look at this, which comes from CBC themselves. So absolutely hilarious what's going on. CBC pauses Twitter activity after being labeled government-funded media. So then it shows you, and then this is kind of their response to it, which is CBC/Radio Canada has paused activities on its corporate and news Twitter accounts after the social media platform put a government-funded media label on its @CBC account. Yeah, we read through that already. And then a spokesperson said, Twitter can be a powerful tool for our journalists to communicate with Canadians, but it undermines the accuracy and professionalism of the work that they do to allow our independence to be falsely described in this way, said corporate spokesperson Leon Ma. So, you know, they're basically just trying to fight back against the fact that this has happened. And, you know, it's not just them either, obviously. National Public Radio in the US announced earlier this month that it was leaving the platform after Twitter labeled its account as state-affiliated media. And this is exactly the response that you would expect from state media, is that they would leave the platform. You know, for literally Twitter telling the truth about what they're about, they leave the platform, which just shows you, it just shows you the corruption, the level of corruption that is in these media organizations. And it just shows you what they're really about and who they're really controlled by. You know, it's just absolutely hilarious. With this spectacle going on, it should be obvious to everybody who is controlling CBC, who is controlling NPR, who is controlling the BBC. But for some, still no, they're still miles asleep. But I mean, it's just absolutely hilarious. And then I want to play you this clip, which actually comes from an interview that Elon Musk did with the BBC, which I think you'll find so interesting and hilarious. So I'm just going to play it for you now.
But nonetheless, free speech is meaningless unless you allow people you don't like to say things you don't like. Otherwise, it's irrelevant. At the point at which you lose free speech, it doesn't come back.
I think the issue some people have is that a lot of people were brought back. I mean, some people were brought back who were previously banned for spreading things like QAnon conspiracies. You have people like Andrew Tate who were brought back, who were previously banned for things like hate speech. Do you think you prioritize freedom of speech over misinformation and hate speech?
Well, you know, who's to say that something is misinformation? Who's the arbiter of that? Is it the BBC?
And You're literally asking me.
Yes.
Well, no, you are the arbiter on Twitter because you own Twitter.
Yes, I'm saying who is to say that one person's misinformation is another person's information? Who is going to decide that?
But you accept that misinformation can be dangerous, that it can cause real-world harms, that it can potentially cause...
Yes, and the point I'm trying to make is that the BBC itself has, at times, published things that are false. Do you agree that that has occurred?
I'm quite sure the BBC have said things before that turn out to not be true.
Correct.
In its, whatever it is, 100-year history, I'm quite sure.
Yes. Even if you aspire to be accurate, there are times when you will not be. To describe a hateful thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content, and I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
don't. You can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you
and
said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
following.
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, then how did you see the hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying...
Then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet. And yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well...
That's false.
No, what I claimed...
You just lied.
What I claimed was...
And you can just see there how that reporter just got absolutely destroyed in that. And I would urge you to go watch the entire interview. It's actually quite funny. But, you know, you could just put CBC in the place of the BBC in that interview, and it's exactly the same problem. Who decides what is misinformation? And the person that decides is ultimately the government. It's ultimately like these state media organizations that are controlled by the government, whatever you want to call them, arms of the government, whatever. It's kind of interesting when you're looking at this article here. It actually says the CBC is a crown corporation wholly owned by the state but operated at an arm's length from government. Okay. I mean, operated at an arm's length from government. We're meant to just believe that's the case. We're meant to just take that word at face value. I mean, is that not misinformation in itself? I mean, and again, this is the point. A lot of what the government says is misinformation. Yet they are allowed to say it. So when it comes to this whole disinformation, misinformation thing, which Trudeau and the Canadian government are just taking to a complete extreme and have done for the past 2 to 3 years, and they're trying to run through this Bill C-11 to control what is put into social media even more. I think that's dangerous. I think that's really dangerous. And it's like Elon even says in that interview, and you don't have to like Elon. You don't have to be an Elon fan. Believe me, there are things I don't like about him too. But he is generally right when it comes to a lot of the standard morals that we should be upholding in society. But the problem is we're not doing that. And I think it's bad because once these things are took away from you, they're rarely handed back to you. Because even if governments change, the other government then sees the advantages of having those controls and those powers that the other government put in place. So they don't often come back to the people. So I think it's kind of a dangerous world that we live in, but I think it's also interesting at the same time that these things are happening, and I think it's fantastic that these things are happening as well. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, you might like this video here. You might also like that video there, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.